I love you. Yesterday you had said something about your inner being, and wouldn't it be nice to know everything it was telling you?
Well, everything that it's telling you now. Not everything it knows forever and ever. That would be overwhelming. But everything that it's thinking about what you're focused upon now.
In that moment.
Yeah.
And I'd like to have a little bit of understanding about that connection to my inner being, as maybe you can say how Esther connects to Abraham. And I know often you're telling stories about how Abraham told Esther something. Is she going into a state like this?
Yeah. When Jerry was around, she would discuss her whatever with Jerry, and they would turn on a recorder, and Jerry would present it as best he could to us, and then we would speak to him in the recorder, and then Esther would listen back. And that was a satisfying way of sort of co-creating with Jerry. These days, Esther takes her laptop and types her question from her conscious Esther awake, aware state. And then she relaxes, gets into what you would describe as a soft meditative state, and takes dictation from us.
And you do
so
it,
we
do you
write,
type it back then to yourself?
We write the answers back to her, and she does it every day.
Okay, so what's the difference between discussing the question with Abraham as to Esther's inner being, or is that the same thing?
Well, Esther's inner being is a component of the larger group of consciousness that we are calling Abraham. Consciousness is a stream, not a clump. So you might think of Esther's inner being as one of the clumps that's in the bigger clump that is the stream of Abraham.
And I do understand that because I've asked this question in a different way before I am ready now in this moment to go to that level where you say, I know I create my own reality, I can be, do, or have whatever I want, where you're saying you can connect to those who create worlds, those people who have come before, all, Abraham, Esther.
You don't have to make a pronouncement and say, I am now ready, and then wait for it to descend on you. Although that willingness and readiness and ableness is a good state of being to be in, because that allows it to happen, and you are more likely to be aware that it's happening as it is happening. But we really want you to feel with us that where you stand, we're putting you here, and out here is this cone of consciousness that's all focused and flowing to you, that is aware of you and knowing of you and thinking about you and focused with you. And all of that is happening whether you pronounce yourself ready for it or not. It doesn't start happening because you ask for it, because you've already asked for it in so many different ways. But by making the statement, as you just did, that helps your readiness, provided the statement isn't lackful-based.
No, it's because...
Well, we know it isn't, but if you're saying I'm ready because you're in this needy place, then even though it will continue to flow as it was even before you put it into words, your acknowledgement that you want something that hasn't been happening might keep you from being in the receiving mode.
The last conversation we had was about focus, and you made a huge distinction for me because you always say, it just takes focus. And I used to think it was focus on what I'm wanting, but you're saying, no, focus on your alignment and focus on your feeling and focus on being aware of your emotion. I'm like,
focus on your connection. Focus on plugging in the toaster before you try to toast the bread.
The first time I was ever in the hot seat was the story Esther told about when she went to the DMV with her vision. And I'm like, if she can do that, what could I do if I had that same focus to have that in my hands? That we have it in my, it's not a question, but I'm often distracted by menial other things. And I'm like, if this is so important and I have the ability to...
But here's the thing that we would like you to settle into, just for a day or 2 or 3 or 10. Magic happens in the menial things too. And just the labeling of it being menial sort of takes the magic away from it. And so if you just acknowledge that Source is involved with you in everything. In the early days when Jerry and Esther were consciously aware that we were flowing to and through Esther, we encouraged them to utilize us in any way they could think of. So one day, they were at the grocery store, and in those days, Esther was still wearing 6-inch Charles Jourdan heels. It was before Tucson had taught her about gravel. So they were in the grocery store, and Jerry said, get Abraham, will you? And Esther says, really? Now? And Jerry said, yes, I'd like them to help us buy our food, pick our food. And so Esther is awkward with us in those days. And so she started screeching through the grocery store with the cart in front of her. And we chose this and 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 this. And they went to the checkout stand and paid for all of it and got home. And then Jerry said, Abraham, why did you choose this particular food? And we said, none of it contains preservatives of any kind. And so then they start reading labels. And there is no preservatives of any kind in any of the food that we put into the basket. Not because we give a rip whether they eat preservatives or not, but because we want them to know that we know what we're doing. We want them to know that we don't have to read the label to know what's in the food. And so then a whole series of things. One night we suggested that they tell their friends, who were at that time the only 2 of about 5 people that knew about Abraham, to go hide somewhere in the city of Phoenix. Now, Phoenix is a very big place. It goes far in every direction. And so Wes and Nancy went in their car to hide. And Jerry was driving and Esther was directing and receiving Abraham. And we said, that way, that way, that way, turn left, turn left, turn left, that way, 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 that way. And they drove for quite a while because it's a very big place. And we said, right here. And so they stopped and they looked and there was no sign of them. And Esther was annoyed because it had been a lot of this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. And in those days, she wasn't really receiving like she is now. So it was awkward, to say the least. And so then that way, 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 stopped again. They're still not there. They spent most of the night moving from place to place around Phoenix. And then right before dawn, and after filling the car up again and eating 3 more Snicker bars, they found them. And Esther said, we're not going to play this game ever again. And then Jerry said, first we went here, and Wes said, we were there, but our inner being told us to keep moving. And then Jerry said, and then we were there, and Wes said, we were there too, but our inner being told us to keep moving. Then Jerry said, and then we were there. And so what was happening was they were following them. They were following the vibrational essence of them, but the manifestation of them was not fast enough in coming to please Esther. It also explains that Esther is not the only one receiving. And that's really what we're wanting you to hear. All of you have the ability to get into vibrational alignment with who you are. Every single one of you has an inner being who has an inner being who has an inner being who has an inner being. In other words, you are all so well connected. You all have so much attention and interest upon who you are right now and where you are and the relationship between where you are and where you want to be. And so it's just a matter of you choosing something that matters to you. But the selection is, it matters enough that you're interested and will do it, but not so much that you'll shoot yourself in your foot with doubt. You have to sort of find that balance. This is something that I want to experience, that when it happens, it will give me enough exhilaration to let me know. It will be a condition that happens that will maybe cause some momentum, but it isn't something that's so far out that my doubt will keep it from coming about now. And so life can be so sweet for you as you just allow the universe to demonstrate to you these things. How important you are, how brilliant you are, how worthy you are, how in alignment or not you are. Don't you really want to get actively connected to your own guidance? And the way you do it is just by deciding to do some of these things and let your inner being guide you to it. We would encourage all of you to play a game. Make a list of 4 or 5 things, as long as you want, but 4 or 5 is enough, of something that you would be interested in seeing that you aren't worried about not seeing. Esther and friends made a list of 20 things, and then they got in a car and roamed around, and within about 4 hours, everything on the list had shown itself to them in some sort of remarkable way. It's a really fun game to play, but it has to be something that you care about and not something that you're worried about. And watch how responsive the universe is to you. Esther has no inside track on non-physical energies. You all have access to all of this, you see. It's just a matter of asking and meaning it, and then getting into the receptive mode, and then doing that enough that you believe in your ability to do it. Esther has never doubted right from the beginning that when she stands at that podium and relaxes her consciousness, that Abraham will come forth. She has never worried about it because it has never failed her. And it won't fail you either. But your ability to recognize it will get better and better and better, you see.
I was just going to say, I think we all wish we could just sit at the computer, write the question, get the answer, and just type it out. And I think we can do that.
We don't tell Esther the direct answer to everything that she asks because she can't receive the direct answer to everything that she's asking. She's like you. Someone the other day said, I'm going to write a book on what's the difference between Abraham and Esther. And Esther said, I'll tell you the difference. Abraham knows and I'm learning. And we would say, she's not quite right. Esther's on the leading edge and we are following. We're all in this together, you see. But when Esther has something that's really bothering her, and she'll sit and she'll write the scenario about it, and then even though she relaxes and gets into the receptive mode, she's still not really in the place that she can hear every subtle nuance that we would like to give her. And so we speak to her, but you got to remember, she's the translator of what we're saying, and she can't translate beyond her ability to let it flow. Much easier for her to translate for you because she's not hung up on your issues. Sometimes she'll read back those writings and she'll realize, well, Abraham told me it then, and then they told me then, and then they told me then, and then they told me then, and then I got it. Be patient with yourself in the same way that your inner being is.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. We saved you to the last because we wanted to end with this powerful conversation, because there's no one in this room, maybe no one in any room, that we have encountered who has a stronger desire than you have. The experiences that you've lived have created a vortex of such magnificence, of such deserving, huge, so many wonderful things there for you. And in a detachment from what has been, those things will begin demonstrating themselves in your experience. And oh boy, will you then have a story to tell. The story that you tell will be maybe 10 chapters long. And the first part of the first chapter that won't last more than 1 full minute of a person reading it will be everything that you just said to us in all those moments. And then the whole rest of that chapter and all the 9 that follow behind will be about the turning point that happened when you finally realized that all of that contrast and all of that stuff you did not want was not for nothing. It was for something, because it caused you to put what you did want in a very powerful way early on in your life into a vibrational vortex that your inner being then began tending. And your inner being never saw you in all of that struggle. Your inner being only saw you in the new now that you had created out of it. And that's what your inner being is looking to now. So every time you tell that story, you separate yourself from who you really are, how your inner being knows you to be, and from the next logical step that will lead you to the next logical step that will lead you to the next logical step that will lead you to the wondrous experience that is there for you to experience. You're not different than others. You are more extreme than most. You are not less deserving than others. You are more desirous than most. You have more engines on this end of your train than anyone that we've encountered recently. And you have more engines on this end of your train than anyone that we've encountered recently. And as you just stop telling that story, lots of those will just fall right off, and immediate things will begin happening to you in a very powerful way. That is our promise to you.